midnight fog drifted heavily across the eastern frontier as massive silent columns advanced steadily across the frozen river boundaries. Command telegraphs hummed continuously through the night, while officers waited for the first artillery barrage to shatter quiet darkness. Heavy paper maps covered the polished oak table, showing vast territorial ambitions stretching toward very distant capital cities recently. Fresh intelligence reports arrived far too late to alter the predetermined invasion schedule carefully drafted by senior military commanders today. A single heavy telephone rang inside the dimly lit headquarters, revealing the irreversible military moment had completely begun now. Millions of soldiers moved forward blindly, without understanding the catastrophic strategic miscalculations hidden deeply beneath their confident marching boots. The dark sky above suddenly illuminated with bright tracer fire, marking the beginning of an unprecedented continental conflict. Senior commanders watched from distant observation posts as the carefully orchestrated military operation accelerated beyond any previous historical precedent. The calendar year was 1941, and Europe remained completely locked in a desperate continental struggle for survival. Germany had conquered neighboring nations rapidly through lightning military campaigns that stunned international observers across the entire vast globe. Eastern European borders stood heavily fortified, while massive Soviet armies gathered defensive positions behind fortified river lines and forests. Severe resource shortages threatened the Central Command supply lines, forcing aggressive territorial expansion into distant fertile agricultural regions overseas. International diplomatic negotiations had completely collapsed, leaving only direct military confrontation as the remaining viable strategic path forward. The political leadership demanded decisive immediate action to secure vital supply routes before very harsh winter weather arrived early. Strategic military planners believed the Eastern Territory would collapse quickly under concentrated pressure from elite highly experienced combat divisions. Previous rapid campaigns had demonstrated overwhelming tactical superiority, creating a lasting false illusion of inevitable victory among top commanders. Senior intelligence analysts warned about extremely harsh terrain conditions, but those critical warnings were quickly dismissed by senior officials. The global balance of power shifted dramatically as domestic industrial production capacity moved steadily toward total, sustained war preparation. Severe economic vulnerabilities demanded rapid territorial acquisition before national financial reserves exhausted their remaining strategic purchasing power entirely today. Fragile alliances fractured under mounting diplomatic pressure, leaving the Central Command completely isolated from traditional international partnerships entirely today. The geopolitical stage was carefully prepared for a massive military undertaking that would redefine global political boundaries forever today. The supreme leader stood confidently before a massive tactical map, observing newly conquered territories stretching across Central Europe recently. Recent military triumphs had created an unshakable belief in personal strategic genius that influenced every critical command decision made. Senior advisors carefully avoided contradicting successful military narratives, fearing immediate professional consequences within the established rigid command hierarchy structure. Previous rapid military victories had systematically erased caution from strategic planning sessions, replacing it entirely with extreme, aggressive territorial ambition. Detailed warning signals from eastern border reconnaissance missions arrived consistently, but were systematically filed away without immediate serious consideration. The psychological momentum of continuous military success blinded strategic planners to harsh logistical realities stretching far beyond established supply capabilities. Domestic political expectations demanded visible military results to maintain strict political authority across increasingly restless urban populations in major cities. Economic international isolation threatened internal stability, forcing national leadership toward expansionist military policies as the only perceived survival mechanism available. Military intelligence divisions reported heavy Soviet defensive preparations, but those reports directly contradicted prevailing deeply optimistic strategic assumptions held. International time pressure accumulated steadily as diplomatic windows closed, forcing accelerated military mobilization schedules across multiple Eastern transport corridors. Competing institutional military factions demanded rapid deployment to secure vital funding allocations and preserve internal bureaucratic influence permanently today. Historical military precedents suggested Eastern campaigns required extensive winter preparations, but modern commanders confidently dismissed those traditional military requirements. The deep belief in racial and ideological superiority reinforced strategic optimism regarding enemy morale and overall organizational resistance capabilities. Military logistical planners recognized severe infrastructure limitations, but their cautious recommendations were systematically overruled during final strategy approval sessions. Unstoppable psychological momentum replaced rational risk assessment, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of escalating territorial demands across vast eastern frontiers. Strategic military briefings increasingly focused on rapid triumph scenarios while completely ignoring potential prolonged resistance from determined enemy defenders. The dominant institutional culture rewarded aggressive proposals heavily, discouraging any officer who suggested alternative cautious strategic approaches openly today. Personal political prestige became directly tied to territorial expansion, speed transforming daily military objectives into strict psychological validation requirements. Repeated diplomatic concessions from neighboring states steadily reinforced the false assumption that international resistance would inevitably collapse under pressure. Senior military planners convinced themselves that numerical inferiority among Eastern forces guaranteed rapid collapse within critical initial invasion phases. Intelligence analytical failures multiplied as confirmation bias filtered incoming field reports through predetermined expectations of enemy weakness continuously. The broader strategic environment deteriorated rapidly as unchecked ambition eclipsed practical military considerations across every command level systematically today. Early morning reconnaissance flights revealed concentrated troop movements along heavily fortified defensive lines near major vital river crossings today. Central Command headquarters swiftly dismissed those aerial photographs as routine defensive posturing rather than coordinated strategic military preparations fully. But something clearly wasn't right as fresh intelligence intercepts suggested unprecedented military radio communications across entire Eastern networks today. What he completely didn't realize was that enemy logistical networks operated with remarkable efficiency behind heavily concealed supply routes today. Heavy military transport railways moved massive artillery pieces continuously toward forward positions, while command centers actively misinterpreted troop concentrations. Rigid groupthink dynamics completely silenced dissenting voices within planning committees, creating an artificial total consensus around rapid victory expectations today. Dangerous false assumptions about enemy command structure convinced strategists that political purges had permanently destroyed military effectiveness entirely completely. Strategic optimism bias steadily transformed logistical warnings into minor inconveniences that could be easily resolved during active combat operations. Senior commanders prioritized defensive speed over defensive caution, believing relentless momentum would permanently disrupt enemy coordination capabilities entirely. The critical warning signs were already there as border checkpoint inspections reported massive civilian evacuations from eastern frontier regions. This single strategic decision would change everything as supply depots emptied rapidly, while advancing divisions consistently outpaced fuel delivery trucks. Military history had seen this exact pattern before when rapid territorial expansion inevitably collapsed under severe environmental logistical strain. Radio communication delays stretched across vast distances, preventing timely tactical adjustments to shifting frontline conditions strategically and completely today. Local weather conditions deteriorated rapidly as unseasonal heavy rainfall transformed unpaved military corridors into completely impassable muddy transport bottlenecks. Enemy tactical retreat was consistently predicted, but defensive formations simply repositioned deeper into heavily fortified interior positions strategically today. Field intelligence analysts reported unexpected industrial relocation efforts, but those critical findings were dismissed as desperate last-minute evacuations. Strategic military miscalculations accumulated steadily as command centers failed to anticipate coordinated partisan resistance behind vital advancing supply lines. The absolute belief in ideological collapse blinded planners to resilient organizational structures operating independently of central military command directives today. Critical transport bottlenecks multiplied continuously as railway gauge differences forced manual cargo transfers, severely delaying ammunition distribution significantly today. Persistent command urgency signals demanded rapid territorial acquisition, but harsh physical geography fundamentally restricted operational tempo across open landscapes. Persistent miscommunication between independent army groups created dangerous tactical gaps in coordinated movements, allowing defensive units to concentrate firepower locally. False intelligence reports consistently suggested fragmented enemy leadership, when unified command structures quietly coordinated massive counteroffensive preparations secretly. Severe environmental strain mounted steadily as mechanical breakdowns increased exponentially across thousands of poorly maintained military transport vehicles today. Artificial strategic deadlines imposed extreme urgency that eliminated careful reconnaissance requirements from final operational deployment schedules completely and permanently. Blind overconfidence transformed potential strategic vulnerabilities into dismissed trivialities as leadership firmly refused to alter predetermined invasion timelines substantially. The dangerous escalation momentum became completely irreversible as mobilization corridors filled continuously with advancing military convoys moving steadily eastward. Command headquarters remained completely detached from frontline realities, relying exclusively on optimistic reports filtered through powerful institutional survival instincts today. Absolute psychological commitment to success blinded strategic planners to mounting evidence of catastrophic logistical exhaustion unfolding rapidly today, completely. Heavy rain pounded continuously against the reinforced war room windows as the Supreme Commander reviewed final invasion authorization documents carefully. Senior military advisors stood in rigid formation, awaiting a single verbal confirmation to initiate massive continental warfare operations immediately today. The critical moment required absolute commitment to an irreversible strategic trajectory that would permanently redefine global power dynamics entirely. Who actually made the final decision remained unquestionable as ultimate authority rested entirely within a single centralized command office today. The decisive action involved authorizing complete military mobilization across 3 separate directional axes, targeting distant major industrial centers simultaneously. Core strategic assumptions rested firmly on the conviction that rapid armored breakthroughs would permanently fragment defensive coordination mechanisms entirely. Heavy environmental pressure mounted rapidly as delayed weather forecasts indicated imminent seasonal deterioration, threatening vital ground operations severely today. Final official authorization signatures were applied without hesitation as the leader personally accepted complete responsibility for impending consequences immediately. Troop deployment orders transmitted instantly through secure communication networks reaching forward command posts across vast major eastern territories immediately. The irreversible commitment activated dormant military machinery across thousands of preparation facilities simultaneously, officially starting the massive invasion today. Command urgency signals flashed continuously across headquarters as coordinated movements accelerated fully beyond any historical military precedent recorded previously. The critical strategic threshold was crossed, permanently transforming diplomatic uncertainty into active continental warfare across multiple geographical fronts simultaneously. Immediate military momentum stalled rapidly as logistical supply chains fractured completely under unprecedented distance requirements across vast open terrain. Unexpected defensive formations materialized constantly behind every advancing combat column, inflicting severe attrition rates against heavily exhausted frontline units. Severe economic shockwaves destabilized domestic production as raw material shortages interrupted critical manufacturing schedules across major industrial facilities today. Fragile alliance structures fractured completely as secondary nations cautiously reassessed their strategic positions under mounting international diplomatic pressure today. Severe political instability emerged rapidly when military setbacks directly contradicted official propaganda broadcasts transmitted across major urban communication networks. Captured territorial gains proved entirely hollow as advancing military divisions consumed critical resources without securing sustainable logistical foundations permanently ever. Strategic international isolation intensified steadily as neutral states formally aligned with opposing coalitions, viewing expansionist aggression as permanent threat today. Harsh winter conditions arrived exceptionally early, devastating severely unprepared military formations, lacking adequate cold weather equipment across frozen eastern landscapes. Critical supply depots remained dangerously empty, as transport corridors remained completely paralyzed by mechanical failures and constant severe terrain obstacles. Senior command structures fractured internally when junior officers publicly questioned strategic directives that produced massive casualty figures consistently across divisions. Domestic economic collapse indicators multiplied rapidly as currency devaluation reflected severe financial strain within urban markets completely today. Entirely. Massive refugee movement corridors expanded continuously as civilian populations fled advancing conflict zones toward interior safe zones permanently today. The overall military balance shifted decisively when industrial production capacity mobilized rapidly across secured interior territories completely undamaged today. International coalition coordination strengthened significantly as allied nations synchronized massive resource allocations to sustain prolonged defensive campaigns effectively today. Imposed strategic deadlines failed completely as anticipated quick military victories transformed into multi-year attritional conflicts steadily draining national reserves. Late institutional survival instincts emerged far too late to reverse dangerous momentum, as command priorities shifted toward desperate retreat operations. Severe psychological consequences mirrored strategic collapse completely when national leadership finally realized critical miscalculations would permanently alter geopolitical boundaries forever. The global historical trajectory shifted irreversibly as military overextension exposed fundamental strategic vulnerabilities across every operational theater globally today. International diplomatic negotiations collapsed entirely as opposing forces gained decisive territorial advantages through coordinated Eastern counteroffensive operations steadily advancing today. Military command headquarters relocated repeatedly as intense frontline pressures forced strategic retreat operations into increasingly unfavorable geographical positions permanently today, completely. The underlying psychological driver remained absolute overconfidence forged through consecutive military victories that deeply distorted strategic reality permanently today. Historical military patterns consistently reveal how repeated success systematically erodes caution, replacing rational assessment with dangerous territorial ambition constantly. Contemporary leadership behavior frequently mirrors this exact psychological mechanism, when rapid professional achievements unintentionally inflate strategic judgment completely dangerously. Modern institutional environments often reward aggressive expansion, heavily discouraging strictly necessary caution that prevents catastrophic operational overextension permanently today. Unchecked psychological momentum consistently overrides empirical evidence, creating self-reinforcing cycles of strategic miscalculation across modern organizational decision-making structures. The extensive historical record demonstrates clearly that unchecked confidence without constraint inevitably transforms ambition into irreversible strategic vulnerability completely. Human psychology consistently dictates that victory breeds dangerous complacency, while complacency guarantees catastrophic failure during subsequent strategic engagements permanently. History is fundamentally shaped by human decisions made under intense pressure and deeply influenced by rooted historical cognitive biases. Human decisions are ultimately shaped by internal psychology, which governs strategic judgment and permanently determines completely historical outcomes forever today.